Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Warhoundcast. This week I'm joined by Max.
Hi there.
And Nathan.
Hello.
And this week we're talking about stuff. Because we basically don't have a plan for this one. And we're just going to talk about what we've been up to and what we hope the future of 40k is. Because, as you're probably aware, there's not a lot of 40k actually happening at the moment. So we'll start with what have people been doing hobby-wise during lockdown?
Do you wanna kick off, Nathan?
Yeah. I built the rest of my Eldar stuff, which I got for my birthday, which was a couple of start collecting boxes because I really wanted some Wraith bone units. So I got 3 Wraith Knights and a unit of Blades and some War Walkers now. And basically the only other thing I've been doing is I sold most of the Crimson Fist stuff that I bought when I was going to make a Crimson Fists army. Because I basically bought like Whirlwinds, Thunderfire Cannons, Whirlwind Scorpius, all of that stuff. And then they just got nerfed into the ground. So I was left with.
I wouldn't say they got nerfed into the ground, but the doctrine changed. They're still very solid units.
Yeah.
You're just gonna go ham on them and just fire everything turn one.
Yeah. So I just thought, like, I've always wanted to do a Space Marine army, and like I was building a competitive list, and then after the nerf, I was just kind of like, do I sell it? Do I not sell it? And then I kind of decided to sell the bits off that I don't want, and then build a Primaris army. So, despite GW having shut down, I've managed to grab a load of bits off of eBay. And yeah, it's mostly built now, but I ran out of Abaddon Black like weeks ago, so I haven't been able to do any painting on the Eldar because I paint the Eldar as Ulthway, so I need Abaddon Black. And yeah, I just haven't started on the Crimson Fists.
Yeah, and and black is a useful base coat for them.
Yep. So yeah, that's pretty much all the 40k hobbying I've done, as well as play a couple of games of Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah, so I did one. I've only done one game of Tabletop Simulator, which was against Nathan. With me having a ping of over 800 for most of it, which was interesting.
And Euan found he was running Triple Lord of Skulls, and the Lord of Skulls models that he found were the size of Warlord Titans on the table.
Yeah, I've had another look for them, and because I really wanted to try the list out, and I now have my hobby progress is I bought a second Lord of Skulls, having had one a long time ago, and got that built and painted amazingly. And no, it's not golden. And yeah, that I remember going into it thinking, I think these are big, but they're not that much bigger. And then I looked at them again with the thing built, and I'm like, yeah, the Lord of Skulls is big, but it doesn't tower over the terrain like it did in our game. So, yeah, it did make quite a big material difference in the fact that I was able to see Swarm Lord turn 1 where I probably shouldn't have been able to. And I was able to shoot him off the board, which, again, I probably shouldn't have been able to, but there we are.
Did they even fit in your deployment zone if you had 3?
Barely.
Yeah. Also, the hitboxes are also bigger than the model by quite a bit. And so getting like things between 2 of them was just really, really awkward, especially. The advantage of playing with someone like Nathan and being someone that I know is like, are you happy that's just within 6 of it? And he's like, yeah, sure. Rather than having to be sort of like trying to get everything a bit wonky in the middle. But yeah. I want to have another game of Tabletop Simulator. I don't want to use that list again because those models were just very janky, let's say.
I think wasn't the deployment hammer and anvil?
Yes.
Yeah, and they took up 3/4 of your entire deployment zone. Or something ridiculous like that. And if like they're probably about 20 inches like wide, and well 20 inches long, but they also had like Euan mentioned, they had like a They had like a 5 or 6 inch like invisible shield around them, so you couldn't get anything near to them, as well as them being that big.
Oh,
Yeah, like trying to get like a sorcerer between them to cast a spell just wasn't really an option to do. You just like, yeah, it's behind it. Just pretend it's another inch forward or whatever. But yeah, it was still a good thing. And we'll come back to Tabletop Simulator. Tabletop Simulator later in a second. But Max, what have you been up to?
Me, so not one to miss out on a sense of irony. I've been working on Death Guard and a bunch of Plague Marines. Because why wouldn't you when there's a global pandemic and everything's shut down? So I have been painting. I think there's 36 actual Plague Marines of various configurations, then 10 Blightlord Terminators, a bunch of characters, and I'd sort of started some of these, but hadn't got very far with them. So I've been working my way through those, along with some bloat drones and a Mephitic Blight Hauler. I'm really hoping that War of the Spider does them some favours. Otherwise, I've got an awful lot of Plague Marines that are pretty useless on the tabletop. Although I did play a game against myself, and with them against Thousand Suns, and beat myself. So But yeah, that's been about it. I ran out of Agrax Earthshade about a week and a half ago, and that felt like it had. I'd come to a natural conclusion on what I could do, and then I'm moving house this week, which is exactly the sort of thing you want to do in the middle of a global pandemic. I was clearing out the garage and found another bottle, so I managed to get a bit more done before I then had to pack all of the models away for the next week or so.
Yeah, you also managed to undercover a secret Death Guard, or 2 secret Death Guard stratagems, which I don't believe anyone knew existed.
Yeah, they were. So I'm not sure how many people will have seen or bought any of it, but GW obviously bought out the Warhammer Conquest series of sort of magazine / miniatures, and in there, along with a couple of stratagems for, I can't remember the name of the Space Marine chapter that they're sort of bigging up in there, but it's so there's one that's really good that you can pop on, and it's 2 CP, so it's quite expensive, but you can pop it on any dude with a blight launcher, and if they hit their target, they don't even have to wound or for the target to fail any saves. If they hit their target with either shot, blight launchers are 2-shot weapons, they reduce all of that model's or that unit's saves by 1. So as worded, that reduces invuns by 1 as well as normal saves, which is actually really good. Kind of wish I'd found that the first times I played with Death Guard.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's really strong. The other one, I think, is a movement debuffer. If you're within 7, you can turn the ground to sort of sticky mud and halve someone's advance and charge rolls, which might be sort of useful, but you have to be quite close to do it. So actually, I'm not convinced it's much of a goer. But yeah, a bit more variety, and I'm kind of expecting that actually those stratagems in. Yeah, sorry, it's called Dissolver Spores is the one with the blight launcher, and then the other one, and that's so Dissolver Spores is 2 CP, and then Photed Mire, which is 1 CP. Use this stratagem at the start of the enemy's movement phase. Select one enemy unit that's within 6 units of any of your Death Guard model until the start of your next movement phase. The selected unit suffers a -2 penalty to their advance and charge distances. So if you've thrown a bloat drone up there into their lines and they've got some fast attack units that want to get past that and into the rest of your stuff, you can just drop that strat and that will slow everything around them. and limit their charge distances, which it's not bad.
Death Guard probably holds the title of worst solo faction in the game. At least armies with a codex, you're not including sort of weird sub-factions like Sisters of Silence. And I think their problem is that they're a slow army that has mediocre firepower, no combat, and is trying to be resilient in a game where the firepower just negates so much of what makes them theoretically tough.
Yeah.
And that's not to say there aren't units in the codex which are good or even solid. You look at Plague Burst Crawlers are probably the best thing in the codex. They're a vehicle which doesn't have a massive amount of firepower. Its main firepower is essentially 2 slightly buffed heavy flamers. It has a mortar on it, which is comically bad and not why you buy the tank at all. But it's toughness 8 with a 5+, 5++, and it's just very hard to kill, even if you chuck loads of modifiers on it for its points. And then you look at the rest of the book and you think, oh, there are units which are okay. The princes are all right. The sorcerers are all right. Plague Marines are almost all right. But there are just better options both within Chaos sub-faction and the game as a whole that really, really put them to shame. You compare a Death Guard Plague Marine to, say, an Iron Hands Intercessor. And the Intercessor has access to better buffs as well as the Plague Marine.
Yeah.
But you get essentially a point of toughness over the Intercessor, and I think that's it you get as an advantage.
You get and a disgusting resilient.
Oh, and disgusting resilient, which is a 5 up compared to a 6+ on a Iron Hands, which you can buff up to a 5+ if you've got the Apothecary chap.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't think anyone running Iron Hands, at least up until Quarantine, was running Iron Hands without the Chief Apothecary.
Yeah. Although that's still a non-zero point in the Death Guard's favour that you don't have to buy someone and you can be more spread out. But the fact that the Intercessor shoots further, harder,
better AP,
and
has another attack in combat.
Yeah,
another wound,
and access to some phenomenally powerful both aura effects with chapter masters, lieutenants, chaplains, and stratagems. The Death Guard stratagems are, I would say, the weakest of any book.
There just aren't that many of them.
Yeah, the supplements for Space Marines have more stratagems than the Death Guard book. And of the Death Guard book, a lot of them are also for very poor units.
Yeah.
So you've got things like ignore moving and fire on a heavy weapon, which you don't really care about with the Death Guard vehicles. You
do care, but you don't get them on the Death Guard vehicles. So as soon as that Plague Burst Crawler's moving, that dreadful mortar that's hitting on 4s is then hitting on 5s. So you absolutely do care. I think the thing is, the book is just. I think must have been the second codex, because obviously they were in the starter box. But it's just an example of really early rules writing. Like even a Death Guard Chaos Lord, he's not toughness 5. He doesn't have disgustingly resilient. He's a copy paste from the Index or the Codex, whichever Chaos Space Marine Codex. So again, it's like. You have these special rules, but they don't even apply to all of your army. So,
yeah, it's a real shame that there are the copy-pasted units don't get the buffs equally, and some do and some don't. And it's very weird that a Nurgle Demon Prince in the book kind of becomes a Death Guard Demon Prince and gets access to Disgusting Resilient, but Possessed don't become Death Guard Possessed, if you know what I mean. No. They're just Nurgle possessed. They don't get access to the Feel No Pain built in, and it's very weird. No, and these are things that would make them interesting because, again, apart really from the crawlers, there's not a lot of stuff in Death Guard that you'd be interested in that Chaos as a faction do elsewhere. Death Guard Sorcerers are pretty okay, but they pale in comparison and versatility to Thousand Suns, both in terms of their base rules and the access to psychic trees.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. You don't even get access to the basic Heretic Astartes. I can't remember the name of the discipline, but you've got 6 psychic powers, whereas Thousand Suns across the board have access to, what is it, 18?
18 plus their Legion specific one.
Yeah, of course.
There is only one slightly janky thing that you could argue is better in Death Guard than any other Chaos book, which isn't exclusive, and that is their cultists can still be taken in 40-man units because they didn't get the FAQ to reduce them to 30.
Oh, brilliant.
But I don't think Death Guard cultist spam is going to suddenly become a new meta.
No.
I think Alpha Legion or Black Legion probably have access to better tools if you're really desperate to make cultist spam work like it's 2018 again.
Yeah. Anyway, well, fingers crossed that Cyclic Awakening gives them some much needed boosts, although if it's anything like the Thousand Suns top up, it's not going to have that big an impact on the meta.
No, I mean at least Thousand Suns got some interesting soup options. I am Death Guard really need a big reworking, and I would be tempted to say that it's beyond their current codex to get them to work. But then again, you look at what happened with Grey Knights and how they went pretty much overnight from bottom to a top tier, if not quite the top. That does mean that there is hope for the Death Guard, even if it's
Well, they're going to be getting rules for the 7 plague companies, which I'm guessing are going to kind of be like top up chapter tactics, or it'll be like the 9 cult Zechian cults for Thousand Suns. I hope it's tactics to give them additional rules, so you can then build either with like lots of demon engines, or you focus on plague marines, or because that actually I would love to be able to make an all infantry, like just bodies everywhere, work, because that's very Death Guard, like slow advancing, hard as nails troops just marching across the board and just deleting everything they come across. But it's not really what they do at the minute. They sort of squelch their way there, and they're usually pretty thin by the time they hit the front lines.
Yeah, I can't even think of what's like a good matchup for a Death Guard army at the moment. Like it's kind of like a close range, fragile list that doesn't want to assault them, and I don't think that list exists.
No.
Maybe like a shooty Gene Stealer cult force that's spamming mining lasers and auto guns, which is kind of a thing. But even then, I think you just get horribly losing on board control.
Yeah, I think potentially, like, because they can put out quite a lot of mortal wounds potentially. Things like with a low model count, like Custodes, might struggle. But again, they're just gonna bounce off Custodes with most of their attacks. So yeah, you're relying on sort of having enough bodies just to play the mission and grab objectives, but that's not a particularly fun way to play the game.
Especially when they're so slow. It's part of their inbuilt weaknesses.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so that's another thing intercessors have. They move faster. There you go.
Yes.
Excellent. Cool. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to. Is painting and praying that Death Guard become good.
So yeah, we kind of Well, if you were to have one particular rule, one particular idea that really came across in Psychic Awakening for them, did you ever thought of what it would be?
Well, one idea I potentially had, just to make their bolters a bit more useful. And I don't know whether this is a stratagem on a unit, but again, that encourages you to take a whacking great big blob of them, or it's one of the 7 plague sort of cohorts great plague companies, is and the ability to make bolt weapons, plague weapons, so you get those rerolls on wounds, which if you have a arch contaminator warlord surrounded by a load of bolters that are rerolling once to hit, rerolling all wounds, suddenly if you've got enough shots, you're going to start getting some damage through. It's not great, but I think it would help a bit. But that's not terribly exciting. I kind of feel like that should be a stratagem somewhere anyway. So the honest answer is I'm not sure. I'd like to see their basic characters get a datasheet update so that they're in line with the rest of their force. But I don't see that happening when datasheet updates happen for a bunch of characters for Space Marine unit. Space Marine chapter masters who still can't get reroll failed hits versus reroll hits. So I'm not sure what the answer is. Two wounds on a Plague Marine. I think suddenly then they're interesting, but apart from that, I don't have an answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's an easy quick fix for them, because they have the problem that old Grey Knights had, in effect, that they're a medium elite base force in a game that's hostile to it without particularly good rules anyway. So there does need to be and they don't even have the advantage that Grey Knights have of being very mobile and able to teleport and sort of psychic tricks and things.
No.
Yeah, so Death Guard is potentially in War of the Spider. Before then, we have Engine War as the next Psychic Awakening book that's planned to come out. And in Engine War, that's going to be about Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, Admech, and Dark Mechanicum. And I hadn't realised it was Dark Mechanicum on initial thing. I had to go back and double check it. And they're very much the wild card in this. Looking at the list of what we know of looking at the list of factions and looking at what we know's coming out, I would be very surprised if Admech weren't the stars of the book, in the same way that Grey Knights were in Ritual of the Damned, for example. Because they have. Sorry?
I think they're going to be reluctant to buff Knights too much for fear of them suddenly being back where they were.
Yes. I'm fine without a Imperial Knight meta again. And given that Admech are getting the most confirmed models, unless there's some really sneaky surprises coming out that GW have been hiding, then they're going to be getting their models that they showed off previously, which are the cavalry chaps, the flying infantry bat people, which I presume isn't going to be their actual name. And they're sort of they're flying transports as well, and there's probably another one I've forgotten in there, which all look really, really cool. I'm not a fan of the aesthetic on like every model, but as an overall thing, I think they look absolutely amazing. And I always get tempted whenever I look at these to be like, "Oh, I should start up Admech," and go, "No, I have way too many factions already."
Yeah, and their options in their fast attack, which Admech don't have a whole ton of in terms of options. You've got the
infiltrator people. Oh,
no, they're elite.
Oh, are they? Okay.
So you've got the chickens, the robot chickens, and that's kind of it.
The robot chickens, the dragoons, they're pretty good. They certainly don't let you down, and they can get off some nasty turn 1 charges if you want to build that way. But you're right. Typically, when you see AdMech, it's either a gun line around Cool or a lot of their various not quite hover tank spam.
Or destroyers.
Oh yeah, plasma destroyers are very, very nasty as well.
Yeah, plasma destroyers serve as to reanimate them. That character from Blackstone Fortress that does something funky that makes them even better.
Dialogus?
Yeah.
He points at something and puts prescience on them, basically. Which for 50 points is a very good deal. But yeah, AdMech aren't in a bad place either at the moment. So if they get some powerful updates in Psychic Awakening, then they could suddenly become a very, very strong force to be reckoned with.
Well, they've got some of the strongest out of line of sight shooting in the game, I think.
Yeah, their hover tanks are great at it. But I think in terms of just sort of raw potential damage, they've got to be up there. Their weakness has always been ballistic skill compared to other factions. But they've got that sort of Tau-esque gun profile, if you know what I mean. Well, they tend to have lots of high strength, high damage weapons, or just massive rate of fire.
Well, most of their stuff hits on 3s. It's only the servitors and the Castellan robots that hit on 4s. Everything else is a 3 up.
Are there tanks? I thought their tanks were 4 up as well.
No, the tanks are 3 up.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of that stuff moves and fires with heavy weapons without penalty. Like even the Dune Crawler, that's still hitting on 3s if it moves.
Yeah. It would be nice to see them get some more mobility options, because movement is typically probably the most skill intensive phase of the game. I think it's either that or charge phase, I'd personally argue. Not necessarily the most important, but the most skill intensive of where your models need to be and all that sort of stuff. And it'd be nice to see them get some options which don't revolve around a gun line, or at least a mostly static force.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It just gives you a lot more options to build slightly differently. I mean, that's not to say that these will be the competitive choices, but I suppose if you're wanting to build a fun list, you've got some more things to do and some more variety. So you're not just spamming all of the same thing if kind of win at all costs isn't necessarily your modus operandi.
Also, given that we've got some robot cavalry, I wonder how many people will start converting these up into Rough Riders, even though they're a Legends option. Because Rough Riders seem to be the thing whenever someone releases a cavalry unit that people immediately want to convert to.
Although it's interesting, isn't it? Because the big mech with custom force fields was a Legends option, and then as soon as the Psychic Awakening dropped, he got pulled out of Legends. So I don't necessarily think that everything's in Legends will stay in there forever. So, I mean,
and hopefully a couple of things that aren't in Legends might get pushed in there. Cough, Dreadnoughts, Chaplain Dreadnoughts. I failed at my cough.
I can guarantee that they'll be written out of the new Forge World books. Because they don't sell the models anymore, so why would they?
No, they can get lost. They can get bent. If I can't get a Chaplain on bike for my Ravenwing, then people can't be having Chaplain Dreadnoughts. They can do one.
Yeah.
On the note of bringing stuff out of Legends, I really wish they would release some Primaris bike characters or something.
Yeah.
To actually give Raven Guard white scars. not Raven Guard, Dark Angels.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's the thing. White Scars at the minute, you can't really. When I've built any Space Marine army that I've built recently, like my Raven Guards, and okay, so it's not the competitive choice, but like I don't have any Raven Guard Centurions because one, that's bullshit, and two, like they're not the future of the range, so it didn't make any sense. But like for White Scars, if you wanted a Primaris army, well, you can stick a load of stuff in impulsors, but it's not really like you haven't got any speeders, you haven't got any bikes, and like, do you really want to be buying that kind of stuff now, knowing that it's literally just around the corner?
Yeah.
It's tricky, and I've kind of bitten the bullet with my Raven Wing and built a second Talon Master just because they're so ruddy good. Because inevitably, like the bikes and the speeders, the basic ones, they'll come out first. It'll be a while before characters like that get the upgrade treatment. So I'll hopefully get some use out of him.
Yeah, it's moving off Admech to the other factions. Dark Mechanicum are an interesting one because they technically exist as a sub-faction in the Forge World rules and have like 3 models for them, if that. But they don't exist, so it's curious as if they're going to just be Admech with different keywords or something else entirely, or if they're just going to be a tiny little sub-faction in the same way that Fallen are. And they got some. I can say they got something in Ritual of the Damned, and they did. I think I'm getting confused with one of the Vigilus books where they got some very minor rules in there. And then we have Knights and Chaos Knights. And if I was going to make one prediction for those two, it'll be that Chaos Knights get the act on full wounds profile stratagem, because I think that's one of the things that's really keeping them down compared to Imperial Knights. So I'd like to see something like that go into the Chaos Knights book.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see them get Chaos Marks.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Because they sort of have relics which go with each knight that mirrors Khorne, Zeech, Slanesh, etc.
But it's weird, they don't really call them that. They're sort of
it's
you
like,
know what they are, but it's like they feel a bit guilty about something, so they're not going to mention it.
Yeah, it's like the plague plate and the blood punchy thing. I'm pretty sure that's how their exact words. Rather than the Khorne smashy plate and the Nurgle plague plate.
Yeah, it's just odd.
But I've no idea what they're going to give Imperial Knights. Given every other Imperial thing, it's probably going to be a Doctrine style thing, which I kind of hope it isn't, because I don't want to see Knights get an overall boost.
I'd be surprised if it was. I'd like to think that with the Imperial Knights, because they're not a top tier army anymore, but they're still kind of like a gatekeeper thing with, like, if you take like Triple Crusaders as Tyrannus and whatever, it would be really cool if they completely reworked the Freeblade stuff, so you could get better options for crafting your own house and whatnot. That'd be cool, as long as it's balanced, obviously, and not ridiculous.
Yeah, because that was one of the things they did very well in the Chaos Knights book, having the Dreadblades equivalent and being able to take that as part of an attachment and having some interesting pros and cons you could take with it. Pacts and Damnations, which allowed some good customization, and given the drawbacks were potentially abusable by the opponent, some interesting counterplay options as well.
Yeah, I don't think the houses that they are, like, obviously there's some great houses depending on what your playstyle is, but I don't think they need working on, like, at all.
No.
Yeah.
Like, some more stratagems would be good in, like, certain situations, and then I think if they, like, added an option to properly make, like, your own house, then Yeah, that'd be cool.
I think they've been quite careful not to make those sort of custom chapters or custom regiments or what have you. There aren't really. I can't think of too many broken combos. I know Space Marines have been able to sort of abuse it a bit because you're able to stack that on top of founding chapter doctrine bonuses and what have you.
Yeah, like the one thing that always gets me is the increased range on flamers, which like flamers are 8 inches for a reason, so that you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like literally across the board. Like I think apart from on a few like special like vehicles and whatnot, and like maybe the flamestorm cannons, which did get a buff. They used to be 8 inches as well, but the flamestorm cannons, now they're 12. So literally across the board, like across most armies, it's 8 inches.
Yeah.
So
weirdly, it's 9 for Death Guard. A lot of Death Guard sort of flame weapons.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, for the plague. Is it what are they called? Plague
spewers.
Plague
spitters and plague spewers. I mean, I don't even really understand why it's 9, given that like the blessed number of Nurgle is 7, and I'm absolutely not saying don't reduce it to 7. Don't do that. Okay, they're bad enough as it is, but 9's just such a weird number.
Yeah, if it was even like 9.1, it would be quite impactful. But 9 is not much of a marginal improvement on 8, given that the big difference is the deep strike.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think. I think the only other not broken, but really strong combos you get is in Eldar, because I know after the Space Marine nerf, there's been a lot of Eldar lists that are coming up quite high.
Well, it's the
tournaments. So
reroll crafters, masterful shots, typically.
Expert crafters, masterful shots, or is it Masters of Concealment? It's quite
Masters
good on
of Concealment. Yeah, as if you're more than 12 inches away, you get cover. And Hunters of Ancient Relics as well for +1 attack in combination with Riding Spears.
Headstrong and Hunters is what Sean used.
Yes.
In his like ridiculous list that has like 2 units of spears and 3 units of Skyweavers, and that's it.
I think I would hope they don't go for custom households personally for knights. Just because the base set of knight households is already quite strong, and there's a lot of good options. And B, the issue with having a custom house for knights is that knights are quite often taken as a one-off on Imperial Soup, and being able to take a custom trait very specifically for one model potentially could be a very scary thing, especially if you had 2 single things of knights, and you could have.
I don't think you get them if you just had the one knight. You don't get them the household traits in your Supreme Command, Super Heavy Auxiliaries. They have to be in a Super Heavy attachment.
Okay, that's a bit different then.
I was thinking more along the lines of what you said, Euan, with like the Dreadblade thing. So like if you took 3 Crusaders, you could make one of them like quote unquote a free blade. It's still counted as the house, but it gets these additional traits and etc. So that you could make them a little bit stronger, but also like add a lot of customization into the army with what you do with that specific knight. So it doesn't it wouldn't break it for soup, because you still wouldn't be able to soup it because it would lose its like things. But then again, you can't make just an overall custom household. It's just like a completely reworked like free blade system kind of thing.
Yeah, a reworked free blade system would be very good, because it's essentially wasted paper in the current Night book.
Yeah.
And do you guys have any thoughts on what Dark Mechanicum might be, or any hopes or dreams for it? Because it seems so tantalizing. But
copy paste of Mechanicus?
I mean, personally, if they had Heroes of Mechanicus, some different chapter tactics, and the Chaos keyword, I would be fine with that, and I would definitely accidentally buy loads of them.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's going to be terribly complicated beyond that. They're introducing a new thing. There are a load of new units anyway. Although whether they're good guy Mechanicus specific or not remains to be seen. But you're getting a bunch of new units anyway, so being able to ally them in probably with other Chaos stuff, which is primarily the main difference at the minute. You can't ally Mechanicus with Chaos Knights or Chaos Demons or what have you. Then that makes suddenly Chaos have access to so many more units. They've got plenty, but there'd be potentially some quite interesting combinations there.
It would add
that's actually quite interesting because I didn't think about the fact that the Dark Mechanicus and the Chaos Knights are in the same book. So you could potentially get some mixing of those two, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the other thing is that although Chaos have a very wide range of selection of units to choose from, they are typically a far more close combat or horde focus with their units.
Yeah,
there is very little high quality shooting across a broad range of units. There are obviously some units that can shoot quite well. Obliterators, Chaos Knights spring to mind. But the AdMech would offer a very serious ranged boost into the Chaos arsenal if they were ported over in probably it could be done in a very similar way to how Genestealer Cult and Imperial Guard interact as Brood Brothers. So that as a template could be an interesting option.
Yeah, I kind of get the impression that they'll be better than, because the thing is with Brood Brothers, you're building them into the same detachments. Is that right?
Yeah.
There's the guard units, as it were, that are in the cult book, and you can also take them as a separate detachment, but you don't get quite as many CP, and you don't get access to faction-specific relics and characters and specific stratagems. So you can take a cult Leman Russ, or you can take a Imperial Guard Leman Russ as an allied choice for Genestealer Cult.
Okay. Interesting.
But you couldn't take a Cadian Leman Russ.
No. But then I suppose it's slightly different, isn't it? Because Guard is Imperium. And what we're saying here is that actually they're getting a whole bunch of separate rules. Don't know, it'd be interesting to see.
I think if they're including it, then it will be you can take Dark Mechanicum are now their entire they're a fully fledged faction.
Yeah.
And you basically here's a load of stratagems, here's some rules for them for Chaos Canticles or whatever, and then that's just it.
I hope that's the case. I've got it in my head that it'll be quite a small subset of things in a similar way to how the Fallen operate with Dark Angels, and there'll be a character and a unit, and that's kind of it, really. But I do hope it's in the here is just AdMech, but you could take them with Chaos now, because that would be very cool.
Yeah. My gut feeling is that is what it will be, because I think it'd be such a wasted opportunity if you say, yeah, we're doing Dark Mechanicus, and then it's just really half-baked. If you're going to do it, you might as well just say, yep, now you can do them all, and they can all be bad guys.
Actually, to be fair, if you if you take a step back and consider how GW do their releases and stuff, why would they not make Dark Mechanicus a big thing when they've been previewing all these new models for the last 6 months?
Yeah, 100%.
So I reckon they'll just be a fully fledged faction, because they'll go, here's a load of new models, and by the way, you can take Chaos AdMech now. So
like Mechanicus, don't like the Emperor. Ta-da!
The other really, really left field option I could think of is there is a lot of 30k Mechanicum units, and I wonder if they would be included in this. But given they're all
that'd be
Forge
interesting,
Worlds,
wouldn't it? Well,
given
because
they're all Forge World, I think that would be very unlikely. But just as an out there idea, it might be interesting.
well,
thought.
interestingly, because like last year they gave all the custodes vehicles and Forge World stuff rules in beta, and then updated them because they didn't previously have them for their Forge World units, which is where you got the Caladius Grav Tank spam. So I could potentially see them doing something like that this year with the Mechanicus, or it's Mechanicum, isn't it? The 30k stuff units on Forge World. But then whether or not that comes out before or after they do an overhaul of Imperial armor remains to be seen.
Yeah, I'd suspect it would come out in that style rather than in a Psychic Awakening. But I believe, I haven't played 30k for a little while, but I believe the 30k Mechanicum could be taken as sort of renegades or as loyalists. So again, another thing where maybe you can have the models across two ranges, and I don't think it'd be hard to have an ad-mech conversion kit where you put a load of spikes on things.
No, well, the special character, the big weird kind of spidery dude, is a bad guy. He's a heretic.
Yeah,
so
the centipede guy.
The human centipede.
I was going to say, I think we're getting a bit off topic, but I'm not sure what our topic is. Any other thoughts on Engine War?
I can't remember what his name is.
Valarius Crawl, or you think of someone else?
No.
It's an actual model that's really cool and it's really freaky. Cool. I can't remember what his name is.
And the Forge World website's down at the minute because
big spider Mechanicus dude.
It's Anacharisauria.
Yeah, that's him.
Fair enough. I was trying to Google him, but I couldn't get the net spelling even remotely correct. And now I just have lots of spiders on my screen. Any other thoughts on Engine War? Or hopes and dreams?
I just kind of hope. Yeah. That's the one.
That is awesome and amazing, that model.
You could probably use him as a Discordant, actually. That'd be really cool.
If I didn't already have 3 Discordants, then I would, because that is, it's even got the sort of bale flavor thing on the top. That is really cool. This is really good podcasting, us all looking at a model that you can't see. Yeah, the hundreds of millions of listeners are going to be absolutely distraught.
They'll be livid.
Mm-hmm. I tell you what, if you're watching this on YouTube, I will try and make sure there is a picture of this on screen rather than the normal one, which, if you are listening to this on YouTube, you will have already seen for the past half an hour or so.
And be wondering why it's there.
Yeah.
Or I'll have forgotten and you'll be having the normal picture of a Eldar battle going on.
Either way, at this point, you're not happy.
Yeah. So, in the absence of real 40k, as it were, a lot of people have been trying out Tabletop Simulator and its various mods in order to play 40k over the internet. I've only had the one game of it with Nathan, which we alluded to earlier. I know Nathan's had a couple of games. Max, have you tried it out at all?
I haven't. And part of the reason for that is obviously, not that I'd be doing it in work anyway, but I only have my work laptop at home, and it's quite a small laptop. And I don't have like a second screen. Second screens at work, and because I've been in the midst of moving, buying more stuff to have to pack up more stuff has felt a little counterintuitive. So I actually haven't really bought any Warhammer in ages, which has been, I mean, good for the bank balance, but So I haven't done it primarily because I'm a bit worried about the fact that I'm not sure I'll be able to really engage with it properly on a relatively small screen.
Yeah. You do need to have quite a lot of like key mouse control and stuff with it because it is like it's run on like a physics engine, so all the dice rolls and everything like follow what your mouse is like doing and everything. So if you like trying to do it on a small screen, then it's really difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to see even on a big screen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had a few battles on it, and they've all been relatively good and easy, to be honest.
Is it relatively straightforward to kind of pick your army and?
Yeah, once you sort of know the gist of what you need to do, it's once you've done it once, like you can just do it over and over again with like multiple different armies and units and stuff. You essentially like you download the game on Steam, and then people create their own like mods for different units for tons of different like tabletop games. But there's I'd say a fair amount of support for 40k, especially when it comes to like the actual gaming boards. Like people have gone to the trouble of making like a board, and then each player gets like a setup area, and you also get all of these like really cool features to the side where like you've got like digital, like in the game, digital clocks and stuff for like counting up victory points and CP and everything like that. So in some ways it actually makes it much easier to play on Tabletop Simulator than playing in real life, especially when it comes to like deployment zones and stuff, because I know the map that I have, you've just got 6 buttons, and whatever deployment zone you roll for, you click on the button and then it drops like a translucent wall on the map that shows you exactly where the deployment zones are. So it's just like, okay, so I just deploy within that kind of thing. So there are some elements that are really good that you kind of wish you had like in real life, and then there are other elements where it's a bit sucky kind of. The movement it's although it's quite, I'm not going to say like refined, I'm not sure what the word for it is, but basically the board is divided up into like a load of like hexes.
Yeah.
So it's invisible, but basically if you like grabbed a model and tried to drop it in a certain place, it might very slightly move out of place because it's like slotting.
Jump a hex.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very minute. So it's not like you pick up a model and try and drop it somewhere and it just shoots like a couple of inches left. But you struggle to get that very minute movements that sometimes that you need in 40k. So that's one thing. The other thing is that it's not officially supported. So all of the mods are made by people, and from what I gather, all of the images that you download, like the 3D renders for the models that these people have made, they're all hosted on free websites, right? And I've added a couple of mods for different armies, and some of the models just don't exist anymore because the hosting has fallen through or whatever.
Oh, right.
So you end up with like an army where only half of the units actually have an image. But for the most part, every army that I've wanted to do, I've been able to do. It's just it takes a little bit of looking around and trying stuff out and that.
Yeah,
for playing.
I agree with. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I'll just finishing now. For playing 40k not in person, it is perfect because you can do absolutely everything that you would do on the tabletop, like very close to what you would do on the tabletop. It's just got a few limitations with obviously it being a game, basically.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much every word you said there. I think that some of the table features and the deployment things and having like ITC score sheets like built into the map is a really cool thing that people have done. And I think that its biggest problem is as you said, the movement of models and things can be a little bit awkward with placement and how you want to position things. And I think if you're using the game as if you're building armies which are very shooting focused, I think it works very well. I think when you've got armies which have a lot of very minutiae movement tricks, then I think you really need to have a clear dialogue with your opponent, which I think you need to do in 40k anyway, but doubly so. Because I think an army like Gene Stealer Cult and being like, I want this model to be closest to your model of this one so that when it piles in, it can go here and trap them. I think having that sort of dialogue is absolutely key to having a game of Tabletop Simulator work. It's pretty much mandatory in regular 40k anyway, I think. I think combat works better in a kind of theoretical space with movement. Anyway, just being like, I'm going to be trying to trap these people, just so you're aware. This guy's 1.001 inch away, so he can't attack, and he's going to move in.
Computer says no.
The hex board kind of thing that I mentioned really becomes apparent when you're trying to do close combat things. So yeah, I agree. If you had something like Gene Stealer Cult or some other like army that relies very heavily on like movement shenanigans, then it doesn't work in the game, and you have to have like an agreement with your opponent that that's what you're doing, and then it gets a little bit complicated because you have to kind of remember where they actually are or are supposed to be. And
lots of small movements are, I think, are its problem. If you're just being like, I need to move my bikers 20 inches up to hide behind this thing, that's not going to be an issue. Especially as it makes working out actual line of sight really easy because you can twist the board in all sorts of manners, and your opponent can do the same, so they can be lining up things as you are.
The measurement's really good as well.
Yes,
so you basically press the left mouse button to pick a unit up, and then hold. I think it's Shift. It might be Shift or Tab. But then from where you've picked that model up, if you then hold those two buttons and then drag your mouse, you get a ruler from the position that you picked the model up to wherever you're putting the model now, which will then increase or decrease and move around like wherever you're moving the model. So it's really easy to move models and find out like distances and everything.
Mm-hmm. But
does it like mark up a unit in the shooting phase when it's fired, or is it just still the same as normal? You have to remember what you have to remember. Shot.
Yeah.
Is there anything that stops you from firing the same unit twice?
Your opponent.
It's not like it's not an actual game. It's like Tabletop Simulator is basically a physics engine, and the people that mod stuff are Tabletop Simulator basically goes, here's a physics engine that you can basically use to simulate real life sort of like tabletop games and stuff like that, and that's it. And then it's the players and like the mod creators that then go, okay, I'm going to try and make 40k. So it's like you're playing a game on the tabletop as if it was like real life. So there's no like, oh, this unit's shot, click a button, yes, they've shot kind of thing. It's literally just like a physics engine where you just pick models up and roll dice and whatnot.
So with stratagems, do you just modify the results that you need on dice based on the impact that the stratagem would have on?
Yeah, same as you would with actual dice. You manually roll the dice, and you're like, cool, I hit on 5s normally, now I pick on 4s, I pick up the 4s.
Yeah, you roll the dice as if you were in real life, and you pick them out as if you were in real life and everything.
Oh, so do you have to pick them out individually, or do you set beforehand which ones you want to remove?
No, you literally pick them out as normal. You've got tools to help you out, like you can hold shift and multiple click loads of them, pick those ones out, drop them down somewhere else. So there's no like
it's not like a dice app.
No, it's literally you're dropped into a world that's just got a physics engine in it, and you get given a table, some dice, and some models, and then you just use your mouse as if it was your hand, kind of thing. If that makes any sense.
I tell you what, it'd be great if you had it with augmented reality. So if you had your own board,
Oh, that would be very cool.
and then you could virtually pick up stuff and move it around with your hands.
Mm.
But yeah, from my point of view, I've enjoyed the thing I've played of it. I'm just never going to replace actual 40k, and when all this is over, then it's probably going to sit in the back burner of my Steam library for most of eternity. But for the most part, it's pretty solid. Yeah. So should we switch up once again?
Yeah,
and get into a sort of is that an engine war ban?
It can be if you want it to be.
We'll say yes. So around this time of year, we typically have our big spring FAQ from GW. It hasn't dropped as yet. I think we can all guess as to why.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything that you guys would like to see in a potential FAQ, which would be likely to have in an FAQ, which is typically sort of minor tweaks to units, points increases only on like very out there.
It was on the Castellan last year, wasn't it? On his guns, they went up.
Yes. And that's typically the only things they're there. So we assume they're not going to add any stratagems or take them away.
I'm not sure even if they had been going to do one and it would have dropped by now, I'm not sure how big it would have been given the size of the sort of changes they made for Space Marines in February. Bearing in mind that everything that was wrong with tournament play or all the lists that were winning pretty much were Space Marine lists, all of the changes related to them in an effort to balance them versus everything else.
Yeah, I think it's hard to know what they would have put in a spring FAQ that would be meaningful in such a way that it would get beyond sort of clarifications that no, X doesn't work with Y, or an interaction is as intended. Given that the Space Marine thing was so close to the closure of 40k, as it were.
Yeah, because we haven't seen what those changes have done really.
Yeah, there are minor things on my end, like how I'd like to see flyers pseudo nerfed across the board or things like that. But they're like things to play styles. It's not like there's currently an 8 flyer list that's running around smashing people up.
I think I played one game with my Raven Wing with the FAQ in effect, and to be honest, I did so much damage turn one that it didn't really matter. Like the fact that I didn't have the extra AP on my heavy weapons for the second turn, it was a complete irrelevance. So it'd be interesting to see against different lists whether it would have the same impact. But then on the flip side, I kind of feel like that with that army, if I'm playing against other Space Marines, I benefit from them not being stuck in Devastator Doctrine for the whole turn.
Nathan, anything from your end?
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I had a look at that Goonhammer article that was like talking about what they think would potentially have come out in the FAQ, and yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with what they said in that, like, maybe the two Space Marine character, like the Chief Apothecary and the Tech Marine one, get a little bit of a nerf because the plus
Master
one
of the Forge.
+1 to hit to everything and +1 to specifically for Iron Hands still, like +1 to their Feel No Pain. Maybe that. They also said reverting the aberrant nerf, which...
Yeah, it'd be nice to see GC the Cult throwing a bit of a bone at the moment.
What was the aberrant nerf?
They went up a I can't remember what it was. I want to say about 20% of their points value, and they are in a spot where the meta turned very harsh to them at the same time as well. That I don't think they're a particularly great pick against Space Marines, regardless.
No.
And they were in a pretty 50-50 spot whether you wanted them or Acolytes and GC L'Occult beforehand. So it seemed like a overly impactful nerf combined with a very hostile meta has made them disappear from lists overnight. And it's really left a hole in GC L'Occult in that they don't have a tough unit that can go in there. Everything is kind of it goes in, it kills something, and then dies horribly. And if it doesn't kill something, then it dies horribly.
Yeah, they sort of got hit from like 3 angles. They got the points increases in chapter approved, and then they got obviously Space Marines coming out, which in some ways directly countered them. And then they've also got they didn't get anything like substantial in Psychic Awakening, like at all. I think the only thing that came out was like you could take near fights with mining lasers and stuff in a better detachment.
Yeah, it's about it.
I'd say a different. I'd say better is probably too strong a word.
Yeah.
In a reasonably interestingly different detachment. They also got, effectively, I view it as one stratagem of note and one character upgrade stratagem of note. The mage just being able to cast an extra power and being able to advance and charge for a CP, which are 2 non-trivial things, but again, they're quite slim pickings when you compare to what Imperial Guard or Tau got in the same book.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Some stuff that one of them said about final clarification on whether you can heroically intervene after redeploying or not.
Oh, yes, because it can't do it in your turn, but can in the opponent's turn or something weird like that.
It just can't. It can't do it regardless. So there was I can't remember when it was, but there was a clarification on the, like, you can't move for any reason other than to charge after coming in as reinforcements or redeploying. And the heroic intervention isn't a charge. So now if you brought the Ykan in on the opponent's turn and then tried to heroically intervene into them, you can't do that anymore, which basically completely nullifies the Ykan and what you could do with it. It's basically just useless.
Yeah.
So,
doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've even seen it in tournaments. I've seen it in a couple of tournaments since that nerf, and people are still playing it as if you can heroically intervene with it. And like the guys here, like on Goonhammer, have basically reiterated that, saying that everyone playing Eldar seems to have an uncle who works at Warhammer World who definitely ruled that they could do that. I said, and the big ITC events generally allow it, but it's completely ridiculous that a top tier unit is consistently allowed to ignore rules as written just because everyone sort of awkwardly assumes that it should be able to do that.
But I mean, it's an Eldar
Which is
model.
fair. Yeah.
Eldar models are allowed to cheat.
Yeah.
It's hidden in the rule book somewhere. Not a spring FAQ thing, but something I hope they don't do with demons, actually, which I just got reminded of. Actually, earlier when we were talking about sacred numbers of Nurgle and having like 7-inch flamers, I hope when their Psychic Awakening buffs come out, they don't tie in too heavily to the sacred numbers, because that almost always makes them really, really terrible. When they decide that a Lord of Skulls is going to cost 888 points because it's fluffy to have the number 8 in there as many times as possible. Or when they were doing formations for demons at the end of 7th, and you had to have 9 units of horrors to get a very minor buff. So I really hope whenever their Psychic Awakening things come around, that they don't lean into it too heavily and just give them reasonable things. And if something happens to be a multiple of 9, give a very trivial thing away. If you have if you have something like, you have a Khorne unit that's a multiple of 8, you get a free musician. Hooray! Not going to break the bank, nice and trivial, rewards you for being fluffy. Doesn't mean you have to take 8 units of Bloodletter to get +1 on the charge or something. Just a minor rant from playing demons and chaos in particular for a while, but hope they just a hope and a prayer. Does anyone else have? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking. Because they do, like with Thousand Suns. Obviously, they did 9 different. What are they called?
Cults, arcane cults or something.
Arcane cults. And I think with a couple of those, they were really kind of scratching around for something to do just to make it fit.
Yeah, I'm just glad they didn't make all the warp charges of all the spells cost 9 or something. So please don't do that.
Yeah, that would be horrendous. It's tricky, isn't it? It's balancing being fluffy with sort of actually making rules that are vaguely useful. And I think if you looked through, I think like with all of their stratagems across the board, you could halve the number of stratagems available and it not affect the game one iota, because there are a bunch of stratagems that literally never see the light of day, like the chaos one with all the different results that you can have based on 2d6. Is it Boon of Chaos?
Yes.
Where you can either turn into a spawn or like, have you ever seen that in a game?
I think
you can either turn into a spawn or turn into a vegetable.
Or a demon prince.
Yeah.
I have, only because I was playing Stuart one time. I think I was playing my elder. He got battered about halfway through and decided he was going to try for some shenanigans with it. But no, I think in a serious game, in a moment that mattered, I've never seen it used.
No, and it takes up four slots on a page of stratagems. So again, that's why Death Guard haven't got any bloody stratagems, because they've got the Boon of Change in there, hogging all the space.
Yeah.
But even then, the other ones that are in there are crap as well.
But yeah, I hope if that, again, demons in general, they reward fluff rather than force fluff. So if it's like, if you think of the like attack again stratagem, which is quite common, if it's 3 CP for all demon units to be able to use it, and then if you've got a Khorne unit, it's 2 CP or something like that. That might be a bit much for that specific example. But something like that rewards it rather than forces it, I think is the way to go.
Yeah.
Or a Khorne unit with a multiple of 8 or whatever it is.
Just on demons, actually, which book are demons going to appear in?
They are. I don't think they're confirmed in. I actually thought they were in Engine War, though they were when I double checked my notes. I don't think we know everything in. No, we do know War of the Spider content, so I guess they're in whatever's after that. I think they're in. Because I think War of the Spider is Fabius Bile plus other Chaos stuff, Death Guard and Custodes.
Yeah, so it's Custodes, Assassins, so basically Talons of the Emperor, Assassins, Sisters of Silence. Then it's Death Guard, and then it's Agents of Bile. So which just reminds me of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is nothing like. And I thought demons were going to be in Engine War. I hadn't heard anything about Dark Mechanicus before, but I mean, goodness knows, because I mean, originally Death Guard were going to be turning up in the book with Tau, and that because there were those stories that came out, and I think they even said they were going to be in there, and then they weren't. Became weird.
Are they in the Necron one potentially?
Pariah.
Yeah, that it would make sense. I haven't heard that, but given Necrons are very much anti-warp, it would make a reasonable adversary.
Well, I think Pariah apparently is going to be Sisters of Battle. Not that they really need it. The Inquisition and Necrons. I'm trying to think of something else because Harlequins and Deathwatch are going to be in White Dwarves. Deathwatch is already out.
Yeah, we would mention them, but that would require more effort than their update.
Copy, paste. Lads, I think I've nailed it.
Yeah. Did you like some of the marine stratagems that are in every book? Now Deathwatch have them.
Yeah, there you go.
Some of them are pretty good. It makes them a pretty solid faction still, but yeah, it doesn't change them in any meaningful way other than give them some minor buffs. Well, some pretty good strats.
The thing is, the change it was so lazy that the stuff that got FAQ'd in February is still wrong in that White Dwarf. So they will require an FAQ to be in line with everything else.
I wonder if their FAQ will be bigger than their update. It does seem entirely possible, but mind you, the FAQ for the main rulebook has got to be bigger than the rulebook at this stage, considering it's 4 pages of rules and many more FAQs which give examples. But that's all something to look forward to whenever ninth edition drops around, which I would have predicted would be this summer. I don't think that's happening now, so I'm going to put a prediction that's going to be next summer.
I thought they said that they were never going to do another edition.
I can't believe that's right.
But I think what they will... It's tricky, isn't it? Because the reason why some of the other editions have probably seemed a bit arbitrary is because the rule changes have been fairly insignificant. But actually, if they kind of got into the mindset of... Because actually, this isn't technically 8th edition. Well, Games Workshop themselves, I don't think have ever really called it 8th edition. That's just what everyone else calls it because it's the edition after 7th.
Which I think is only 7th because it's the edition after 6th. I think 5th or 6th was the last one to actually be called 5th or 6th.
Yeah, so I kind of wonder whether they will just release a consolidated an updated rules compendium with some gameplay tweaks. I don't know what those would be, but they won't be wholesale changes. I don't think they'll do enough for it to warrant being a new edition.
There wasn't a massive amount of change between 6th and 7th, so I wouldn't be surprised if 9th came out and it's very similar to what's happened in Age of Sigmar 1 to Age of Sigmar 2, where it's more of, as you said, a tidying up, consolidating of rules, and more of a general cleanup, with minor tweaks to how little things work here and there, just the benefit of how things work over time. So getting like all the stuff that switching up, say, how many points a battalion gives you or something, something that affects that rather than affects how a battalion plays or how the shooting phase plays out, for example.
I was going to say, do you think they'd change things like pile-in and consolidates, or when the psychic phase happens, or because obviously in Sigmar any psychic powers happen in the hero phase. That would massively change the game in terms of when the psychic phase happens.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule against it. I like where it is at the moment, so you can move your psychics into position and then do it. But if they feel it works better at the start of the phase, or potentially even outside of the phase, sort of outside the turn phase, for psychic in the same way that sort of chaplain roll-offs happen outside of a phase, might be kind of an interesting way to do things like that. So you could get defensive buffs off in your opponent's turn.
Well, that's the thing now. You do have that kind of weird pre-turn non-phase phase where more and more stuff is starting to happen. So I wonder whether there will be some kind of sort of consolidation around that.
It's the hero phase in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah,
as a comparable example, and if they wanted to move Psychic Phase to go there along with other things, it would make a lot of sense. And it would reward a different type of planning where my Psyker can't do something this turn, he's going to move here, so next turn he's going to be in range to buff X unit or cast Smite on them or whoever. And rewards planning rather than spur of the moment things. At the cost of making it a bit tougher for newer players, I think. But something to look forward to, and probably speculate in more detail on a future episode. Which might even be next time if there's still no news to speak of such. But we'll have to see. But I think that feels like a good place to wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts from you two?
Just wanna play a game of 40k.
Yeah, missing it very much. Playing it in the flesh.
Yeah,
it's just not the same. I mean, like I said, I got so desperate, I taped out the size of a board in our spare room on the floor, and played a game against myself, which was the height of desperation.
I didn't go that far, but I did play a game with myself on Tabletop Simulator. So.
There's a very good quote from a comedy sketch series called Loading Ready Run, where someone has played a game of Magic against themselves to test out their decks. And that's one of my favourite quotes. It was like, "What did you learn about the game?" I was like, "Well, I learned that I'm both a bad winner and a sore loser."
I think the thing I found tricky was, because I've been painting the Death Guard up at the minute, was to try and be as strong as I possibly could for both sides and make the right tactical decisions for both sides. And like, funny enough, I probably made as many mistakes for Death Guard as I did for Thousand Suns, but it was I think that was the hardest thing, was trying to be honest and outthink myself. And sometimes I managed to outthink myself by having not thought of something as the sort of one player, and then when it was the other me's turn, and looking at it from that perspective, suddenly I thought about something that other me hadn't thought about. So it was a bit of a weird thing. I was like, how have I outthought myself?
And then I looked in the mirror and we both laughed.
Good. Excellent. Yeah, I'm going mad.
That seems like a very good place to leave it. So thanks for joining me, chaps.
Yeah.
That's right.
And we'll do this again, I'm sure, anon.
Yep.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.